in the blue, taking down Estrella 2-1 to move on here in lower bracket round 2 for Game and Gladiators. It's SHIN.
And his opponent in the northwest position, spawning as the red Protoss player. He is Stats.
And what a brain trust, Protoss brain trust Twisted Minds has been able to pull together. We got Stats, we got Classic, all just sitting there, percolating, combining their knowledge. And hey, you know what? The funny thing, I shouldn't say the funny thing about this, the big benefit. So Twisted Minds picked up Classic before. It wasn't the Esports World Cup last year, it was Gamers 8, but before Gamers 8 last year. And they had a similar team challenge, not quite as big, but similar team challenge. And Classic's run into top 8, I think it was, of Gamers 8 last year, was the thing that put Twisted Minds over the top and allowed them to win the entire team challenge. And that has, to the best of my knowledge, has funded Twisted Minds operations for like the next year and a half. So I know we talked a lot about these players picking, or these teams picking these players up, but you want some object lesson about how impactful picking up a single StarCraft player can be? Well, that's a really big one.
I personally think that it is the biggest success of the design of the EWC system that organizations are encouraged to build around actually just competing in esports rather than competing in any one specific game, because there's a lot of us out there that like to play lots of different games, and as much as we end up in our own little spaces and our own little bubbles, getting those opportunities to interact or having to cheer for, you know, maybe somebody that you love in StarCraft's teammate in another game, just because, you know, it can turn into a payday for them, right? It's a great thing that we can all be encouraged to want to kind of see a cumulative success for some of these organizations, and it makes you kind of respect them a little bit more for picking your players up, because now they're a part of something else too. And that's, yeah, for me that's what makes it really exciting, is there is going to be a whole different energy going into that event for that reason. But probably the coolest part about this circuit, in my opinion, I mean, the big prize pool helps too, but it is really nice to get to see some love shown towards a little bit more of a dated genre, right? You know, there's a little bit of fresh stuff on the way, but it's really awesome that you get to see the institutional respect for the longevity and the competitiveness of a game like StarCraft. Especially, you know, StarCraft 2, we've been playing it 14 years, right? Been playing this game longer than the gap we had between Brood War and SC2 at this point.
Now, Nate, you don't understand. X player plays a game that is not my game, therefore I must hate them. Right? That's how this works. I gotta be in.
It's okay to be wrong, but you know, the nice thing is that the people making the decisions have made the correct choice.
There we go.
Thankfully, I don't have to worry about the wrong person there.
There we go. I will play the foil, so we can just make you look better by comparison. No, but I agree. It is really exciting to go, and also, I mean, there's a reason I cheer for Team Liquid across every sport, and it is generally because they've supported StarCraft for so long.
Yeah, well, they support the community too. You know, when you think about organizations in this space, it's another reason why I love those Basilisk guys. They're running tournaments every week. You know, they're putting money directly in the pockets of players. It's what you love to see. That's what you need for the ecosystem to exist at all. The more the merrier.
Yeah, again, if we can incentivize more players to practice, to stay up and like be able to make this their full-time thing, it is absolutely worthwhile. And you know, for now, as we talk about this game, Stats has lost an Oracle, which is not good. He's killed a single drone. That is not worth doing. So Stats, he's got a single Oracle on the map. Well, actually, he's got 2. I guess he did go up to 3. Twilight, Forge, all that on the way. But what's interesting here is that he didn't take the triangular base, and I know we've talked about this a lot, but it's important to talk about it in this one because this matters for 2 reasons. This map is incredibly good for Swarm Host play. You have the mineral wall right there that you can kind of nudge Swarm Host against, and then you can put Locust either into the natural or the main base. That's the problem, is these depths are going to get found out in the middle of the map. I don't think there are enough lings to kill them all off, so instead it's a fairly decent trade for Stats. But the other problem is yes, okay, so Swarm Hosts are really good on this map. Blink Stalkers can also be really good on the map because of the mineral wall, and you try to push through it, but you can't really push through that angle or kind of push through this low ground ramp that actually is very good for a bunch of Stalkers if you don't have this mineral wall mined out easily. So I see a lot of really successful Protoss players, they mine this out, they take the third base right here, makes it a little bit harder for the Nidus play to happen, for the Swarmos play that it seems like SHIN wants to go for. It makes it a little bit harder for that to happen, and it unlocks your own aggression. So Stats, by playing defensively on this map in particular, he is giving SHIN so much room to make this aggression happen.
You've painted a terrifying image in my head of your last little stretch there, Bayo, because I think you're spot on too. It's so uncomfortable because if he had tried to mine through the minerals to take that triangular third, if we can call it that, then you're at the point where we've basically eliminated half the map from play. So he kind of turns into this like, okay, it's just this very direct, we're in each other's faces sort of thing, and maybe that would have ended up being what he needed, because I have to agree with you, just giving him that air path outside. Is there anything built towards the edge of the base? No, but that also means that hypothetically we could see the worm, could see a worm end up going in there too if he even needs it, since the swarm host can just launch across the gap and don't even think. Yeah, he didn't even. Okay, he's gonna get the Nidus now, but I was gonna say he could launch at least the first wave from outside there. So Stats is gonna send a Void Ray to check that spot as Lings poke the third base here again. The battery overcharge is gonna keep this Stalker alive, and he will live to fight another day. But I like where SHIN's at. I think he's put himself in a pretty nice spot. His bases are not really in accessible areas, and he didn't mind that big of a path open either. So even if the army of Stats tried to attack or go through there, it would kind of have a difficult time, and he's just sort of distracting him with these Zerglings on the map. This is going to turn into the big moment, though. He does move the Void Ray. He actually ends up clicking it directly towards where those swarm hosts are going to be coming from, so he will get I don't know, nary a heads up, so almost a heads up. It's on its way, but at least he wasn't completely blindsided by it.
Well, on the flip
I don't know
side,
if it'll help much.
He does, like, okay, so this base is dead. There's no shield battery here. There's no army here. The base is dead. But he does kill 2 swarm hosts, and that is actually really nice. It does take down a lot of the 20%-ish, 15% of the power of this swarm host attack. It does force SHIN to make a couple more swarm hosts, and that is something. He also has Storm just about done. His 4th base is on the way on the right side. As much as we talk about, okay, this map is pain because, I mean, we just saw what happened, right? You have so much opportunity. On the flip side, this is a lot harder of a position to try to put the Swarmos on top of, technically, but hey, you can put a Nidus on top of it. So this 4th base, again, the defense is not really there. We're going to see the Locust pop up in just a second, and Stats is going to be a sad little 2-base Protoss boy. He's not... This does not spark joy in the life of a growing Protoss player, Nate. This is not happiness.
Yeah, and now he's going in for the counter. He's going in for the run by, trying to force his way through into the natural a little bit. Use the roaches to open it up, pull the roaches back, send Lings through. So he's trying to do some cute control moves here. Tries to go for a bit of a dive on a handful of those High Templar as well. Not going to quite be able to get them, but there is the Nidus finishing outside the base. So I think this is a tricky spot. This is like one of those things where the map has perhaps even an unanticipated effect. The Stalkers fight the roaches on the right side, but there's still quite a ways that the Locust have to go if he spawns them from here too. So it's a non-negligible amount of that timed life. They only live for like 18 seconds before the Locust pop. So when you have to spend half that time flying to the base, that can also make things easier. He's going to try and focus the Nexus. Will he be able to get it? Looks like the answer is yes. And don't ever make the mistake of underestimating those Locusts. If they get on something, it's going to die. That getting on it is that's the hard part.
Yeah, it's funny. I hear you telling this story of like, oh, it's, you know, you miss out on some flying time, and
he lost about 8 or 9 seconds. He's got, okay, they're only going to live for like 5 seconds once they land. Nope, Nexus is dead. Whatever.
Like, without a shield battery, without a storm there, it's not going to stay alive. So
to quote my favorite Frozen song, some things never change.
I thought you were going to say you just got to let the Nexus go, but Stats has to let this game go.
I feel like we managed to get to a pretty perfect ending of this game as far as this cast went. Not bad, Bayo. That was it's if you get caught off guard, right? If you're not pre-prepared for that first Locust wave and it just takes a Nexus, yeah. And the other side too is like there's an alternate reality, right? We go into the multiverse and it's just, yeah, the first Locust wave got shut down by like 2 Void Rays and he lost very easily with everything else being normal. So that's the hard part. They're a very, you either hit a home run or it's just 3 outs instantly, but they can be strong.
Baseball, my favorite sport. I know people disagree with that, but anyways, point being, I think this all just goes down to Stats' expansion pattern. I think if you go and you take that triangular third, you open that spot up, suddenly you're attacking through there, you have stalkers on the other side of the map, you're taking advantage of that low ground ramp, and the Swarm hosts are kind of like mutas, if you think about it, where if you can kneecap it, if you can get aggression on the map as they're spawning or like right before they're spawning, you
very
can
similar.
Totally remove their threat, right? And that build generally is something that you can go and kind of hit, like with Blink at like 630 or so if you're going the delayed +1 version on the third base, and you have that pressure, and suddenly it becomes a lot harder for Shin. But if you just give him that corner of the map, he's gonna get his Swarm hosts out, you're gonna lose a base, it's highly unlikely you defend it, and it just starts snowballing from there. So we saw that happening. I think it was very much a let's let them know that we are ready to go. Very much kind of a build or building placement decision that really torpedoed Stats in that game. But at the end of the day, Shin, he's not unhappy about it. He's up 1.
I really like you drawing the Mutalist comparison though, Bayo, because I think it touches at the heart of what really makes this strategy good. And I think it's easy to miss the forest for the trees. And a lot of people always focus on like, oh, free units. Oh, it's like, well, they're Swarm hosts, right? And it's like, yeah, but it's a very huge investment up front with no guarantee of return, because it is a timed life spawner. They can't defend themselves, right? It's the same thing when you have a low number of mutas. It's not, they don't usually do much if your opponent sees it coming. But when they don't, when you get that first little bit and you can offset them, knock them off their stance, then you can really torpedo a game in a crazy way. And that is what we just saw. So I think you put it very eloquently there. And at least I hope maybe for some of our sanity's sake that we don't have a repeat of that in game 2 as we're loaded in.
Well, it is Alcyone, and that's not quite as good of a Swarm host map. But for now, in the upper right, he's up 1. Looking again to find his way to drop down to knockout bracket round 3, make his run that much easier. For Game and Gladiators, it's Shin.
And his opponent in the bottom left, the red Protoss player, he is Stats.
You know, Nate, final thought about that game number 1. That really felt like a lack of prep on Stats' side more than anything else, because first of all, if anyone's been like, so I've cast a decent amount of Shin games recently, I'll tell you, he's a Swarm host guy. Like, that is what he does on maps like that. So between the fact that kind of Shin is a known Swarm host abuser and it's Amphion, and I was about, I'm sorry, this is something that Classic has started to do a little bit, and I guess Stats has picked it up. Classic actually beat Rainer with this in a Kung Fu Cup like a week and a half ago, where you just cannon rush the third base, and it is actually pretty hard for the pro if you do it right. And
this position, right? It looks like the geometry layout.
It works out
it's
really
gonna be
nicely.
Quite hard to.
Yeah.
It's like an easy wall here, isn't it?
It is. You can mess it up, and the drone pull, you got to be careful when this screws up. The drones kind of get around, but at this point, yeah, you're not getting on top of this.
They can't get in that pocket from there. They can't get in from there. Oh, that's disgusting. Yeah. Well, there you go. Oh my goodness. Just another reason I'm glad I don't. Well, I guess if I played Zerg, I'd have to ask myself why I'm going hatch first to this gold base and expecting to not have any kind of retaliation. But he does get the cancel. So Shin says, if you're going to put that much into it, I'll back off. Whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, I really want to see Stats just cancel the cannon now. Like, Stats, I guess, it's okay. Maybe you think, the moment I cancel, he's going to go double back, and then whatever. But for now, he's got this nice defensive emplacement. Second question here, Nate, as we talk about this, as Zealot runs across the map to start to put pressure on this, and it shouldn't get a lot done. Zealots or his links are on the way, but do you drop a gateway here and just go to round 2, and this is your warp in spot?
Yeah, I mean, if it holds up eventually, I don't see any reason not to. In a way, it protects itself. It kind of asks for. I mean, if you send enough lings there, it's not like it's not like the one cannon can just do infinite DPS or whatever, but like he could eventually break it. But if you wanted to break it without straining, you almost kind of have to ask for it to be like roaches or a Ravager or 2 or something like that, right? So for him to get the economy, to be building that, I just think it kind of makes it awkward for him in general. That's a really good point. It shouldn't be too hard for him to add that as a reinforcement down the line if he wants to take this on a big 2-base aggression.
So what I'm trying to remember, though, is when I've seen Classic, I actually didn't see the Kung Fu Cup game. I saw the game that he failed to make this work. But his follow-up, I want to say, was like +1, was like +1 charge lot or something like that, which makes a lot of sense, right? You would get a quick +1 because you have this forge done already, but we're not quite seeing stats do that. Eventually there's going to be a +1, absolutely, but he's not really making that happen. Instead, it's going to be
a really good point though, because he's going into Adepts with glaives.
Yeah.
So maybe his thought process is, I'm going to 2-shot the Lings anyway, so it doesn't matter. That's about the only thing I could guess.
I mean, I do like, he's going to lose an Adept off this, but the nice thing about this as well is he's just posturing on the map is you have this, it's one cannon, it's not a ton certainly, but when we're looking at these early game engagements with just a bunch of Lings, one cannon kills a surprising amount of Lings before it goes down. And I mean, you're not burrowing through this, so before these units would go down, again, it's a lot of Lings. So we're now going to see a second Adept warped in, which again, you talked about being able to 2-shot versus 1-shot. That's always going to be really nice. Queen's going down the ramp, Nate, makes this a little hard. In fact, this Adept is just going to get warped in and killed. So maybe a little bit of an overcommitment for stats, but he still holds the spot. And that does mean that these Gladepts, as they arrive, you can warp them in 4 at a time on the pylons. Life's going to be rough for shit.
There's so many layers to what makes this like weird, but also good, but also bad. Like in that SHIN has to respect it because of what he has there, but also for stats, it's like, yeah, you want to use it, but overextending here is what costs you. And I think the fact that he's still just cranking out Adepts as this, he starts the third Nexus behind it. But all I'm gonna say is it's very difficult to get your opponent to respect something like this without committing some units. So in a weird way, if he stops drones from being made, he's kind of holding the economy even-ish as long as he trades a little bit here while he takes the third. I don't know if that makes too much sense, but it's like he kind of had to try to buy some time with this, but also there was just no way he was going to be able to do anything with it because of the roaches.
Yeah, the problem as well as we take a look at this is, so technically, SHIN he committed to a 15 hatch at the natural at the gold base. It had to get canceled. That's money lost. That's time lost. Turns into effectively a pool first, and life gets really weird. Theoretically, this is a setup where SHIN should be economically behind. He should be in a bad spot. You just put a little pressure on, that's fine, but you should have that macro advantage. Because he committed to glaives in a game where SHIN's already kind of behind a little bit, and the answer then is it's probably going to be some pressure with roaches and ravagers. He's now committed into a tech that is horrendous against what's happening. Yes, there's an Immortal out. Maybe that makes life a little bit easier, but this third base should get canceled. I was kind of expecting the Link to just try to dive on top of the Immortal, because even if the Adepts can shade back, Nate, the Immortal does not have that privilege. So this Immortal, I guess that you're killing the third base, but like,
YOLOs it on the Ravagers. Yeah, it dies. The third's gone. So stats, I think stats recognized that he kind of had to try and find a way to make this work since he had a very awkward tech.